So in this video, we're going to be discussing how do we interpret the attributes in a real world situation. So we're talking about linear attributes here. So let's talk about the three linear attributes that we've been studying so far. So the first one we've been studying is slope. So remember that slope is the rate of change of a situation, and it is the change in y or the change in x. We have to include units when we're talking about a real world situation. Now remember that a y-intercept, it is the value of y when x is 0. So it's 0, comma, b. We use b to represent the y-intercept. And it is the value of y when x is 0. So this is usually a lot of times known as the initial value, but not all the time, but a lot of the times in our easier problems, this will be like what we started with. So a coordinate for our x-intercept, it's going to be the reverse. So it's going to be our x when we have that y is 0. And it is the value of x when y is 0. And a lot of the times in our easier problems, it's going to be known as the ending value. Again, I'll put a star on this because this is for easier type of problems. We're going to see some problems where that's not technically what it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and look. This one's one of our easier problems. We have here our a graph, and the first thing that we need to figure out is what's the slope and what does it mean. Okay, so the slope here, we're going to find it by getting two really good points. So I'm going to get this point up here, and let's say this point down here. So I notice, I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. I went from 600 to 900 on my rise. So again, I'm going down. And if we use our slope formula, right, I would do 600 minus, or we would do 300 minus 600, right, because we ended at 300. So 300 minus 600. And so the x value of this point is 4, so we would do 4. And the x value of this point right here is 0, so you do minus 0. And then 300 minus 600 is negative 300 divided by 4. So how can we figure that out? Well, we can divide 300 by 4 and figure out what that would be. So let's see. 300 divided by 4. So 4 goes into 30. I know for sure 7 times. And 7 times 4 is 28. Minus, from 30 you're going to get 20, bring down this. And then 20 goes into 4 5 times. So our slope simplifies to negative 75 over 1. Alright, so remember we need to include our units here. So we're talking about my y's here are money, or account balance, and my x's are withdrawal. So the value here is negative $75 per one withdrawal. We're going to put a W for withdrawal. The meaning is I am losing $75. Let's go ahead and type that out instead. So we are losing $75 each withdrawal. So this is kind of like a sad situation because we're getting money taken away. Alright, so now our y-intercept here is this point up here. It is the value of y when x is 0. So it's going to be, let's go ahead and just put 600. And it's dollars because it's the y value. And the meaning is it's the money we started with. So again, the money when the withdrawals is 0. So the money you started with. My x-intercept is right here. So this is, again, the value of x when y is 0. So my x-intercept here is 8 withdrawals. And this is the withdrawals that I needed to lose all my money. So let's go ahead and type that one out so that it's it's legible. So withdrawals for 0 for no, all money gone. That sounds better. Okay. So now let's go ahead and review our domain and our range. Remember, domain is the value of x. So for a real world situation, a lot of times this might not be all real numbers. There's actually ending points. So what is the smallest value of x and what is the biggest value of x? Well, the smallest I can be is 0. Is less than or equal to, we're talking about a withdrawal, so I'm going to use the letter W, is less than or equal to 8. So we can have anything from 0 to 8 withdrawals. And then the money in the account can go from anything from 0 to less than or equal to, let's say, account balance, so A of W is less than or equal to 600, because that's the most money you can have in that account. So again, my meaning here is the number of withdrawals, and the meaning here is the number of the amount of money. So that's how much amount money I can have in the account at any given time. Okay, so now let's go ahead and look at something slightly more difficult. So in this case, I have, during a special sale, all video games cost $22 and all movies cost $10. Derek spent his $220 in birthday money on these movies and video games. So let's first talk about why this is a situation that's linear. Well, there is a relationship here between the amount of video games and the amount of movies. The more video games you buy, the less movies you buy, and so forth for the movies. There's a relationship here, a constant relationship here, a ratio. So therefore, this is a line. And this is the equation apparently, because so video games cost $22. So X means video games, and movies cost $10 a piece, and this is my total. So let's go ahead and figure out the slope of this using what we know about how to solve algebraically. So my slope here, when I solve this out, we're going to subtract 22x from both sides. And then we're going to divide everybody by 10. And so my equation in slope-intercept form that tells me how many movies you get per how many video games you buy is 22 minus, so we can simplify this, right, because 2 goes into both of these numbers, so 11 over 5x. So my slope is negative 11 over 5. Now we need to interpret this slope. What does this mean? So remember, this is the change of y. So the change in, remember, y means movies, per the change in x, per the change in video games. So we have a negative 11 movies per 5 video games. So this basically means that you are, for every 5 video games that you decide to buy, you can't buy 11 movies, or so forth. For every 11 movies you buy, you can't buy 5 video games. There's a negative relationship, right? Because if you buy 11 movies, you can't buy some of the video games. You don't have infinite amount of money. So let's go ahead and write down this for every 11 movies, you can't buy 5 video games. Okay, now let's go ahead and find the y-intercept. So my y-intercept here, if I plug in it's the value of y when I plug in a 0 for x. So if I plug in a 0 for x, that means the 22x is going to be gone. It would be 10y So 10y equals 220. If we divide both sides by 10, we'll have that y is equal to 22. So my y-intercept is 22. And we also got this from this equation right here when we solve for y. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, this is again the value of y, the value of movies when video games is 0. It's the maximum movies you can buy. If you decide not to buy any video games at all, the most movies you can buy is $22 with all of your money. So maximum movies you can buy. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing to find my x-intercept. So my x-intercept, I would take my equation up here and I plug in a 0 for y. So it would look like this. So 22x plus 10 times 0 equals 220. This cancels, and so you're left with 22x equals 220. Divide this by 22 and you get that x equals 10. So here my x-intercept is 10. And again, this is the value of x, so the value of the video games, so the amount of video games you can get if you buy no movies. So that means if you decided to spend all of your money on video games, this is the maximum that you can get. So let's go ahead and type that in. So it's the maximum movies you can buy. Okay, so my domain is, let's go ahead and talk about what the meaning of it is, my x values. So it's amount of video games you can buy. I just noticed I did a typo here. This should say video games. You can buy. So go ahead and fix that on your notes as well. And so since my x's is the amount of video games I can buy, well, what's the least amount of video games you can buy? Well, you can buy none. Or, well, the maximum video games you can buy is 10. So I would go ahead and put, let's just put x, since we're using x in the equation, 10. Okay, now for my range, it is, remember that range is your y's, and if we come here to my equation, to this little blurb here, y represents the number of movies. So this, my range represents the number of movies I can buy. Of movies I can buy. Or you can buy. And then let's go ahead and make this just a little bit smaller so it fits. Okay, great. And so I can decide to not buy any movies at all. Or we can decide that we can spend all of our monies on movies. And well, what was the most movies you can buy? Well, that's my y-intercept, 22. So this next example is pretty similar to the one we just did, but instead of an equation, I have a table. So it says each book in a store costs $5 and each pen costs $3. Angela wants to spend exactly $30. So we have a budget here. And we're trying to buy some pens and some books. Obviously, if you buy more of one, you have to buy less of the other and so forth. There's a little ratio going on here. So the table below represents this relationship of pens and books. Okay, so the first thing that we would do is find the slope here. So how do we find the slope from a table? Well, we figure out what's the change in the y's, which is in this case 5. It goes down 5 over the change in the books, which is 3. So my slope is negative 5 over 3. And just like the last time, it represents, it's saying that for every 5 pens you don't buy, you can buy 3 books. So let's go ahead and type in. For every 5 pens not bought, 3 books can be purchased. Again, right, you have to leave some to get the other. And that's why it's a negative relationship. Our y-intercept is right here. It's the value of y when x is 0. So it's 10, and it's 10 pens. So I have 10, and it is the most pens I can buy. Our x-intercept is down here. It's the value of x when y is 0. So again, it's the most books you can buy. Our domain is the value of x. So our domain here is books. And well, you can buy any books from 0 to 6. And for a range, it's the pens, and you can buy pens from 0 to 10. Okay, so I hope that you found this video useful and saw that there are multiple ways that I can talk about a linear function, but the attributes always remain the same thing. We're always trying to find the same thing. Slope is the rate of change between the two items. Y-intercept is the value of y when the x is 0, when whatever we're calling the x is 0. And x-intercept is the value of x when y is 0. So it's always the same thing, and we're always trying to describe the same thing, regardless of the way that the situation is presented. Okay, so I hope you've taken good notes, and this is the end of this video.